You do not have a wolf." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Nessa felt them settle into her bones the way they always did. Heavy and cold and final. Elder Moira's voice carried across the ceremonial grounds, and even though the old woman had not raised her tone, somehow everyone heard. Somehow they always heard when it was time to remind Nessa of what she lacked. The ritual of the Crimson Moon was the most sacred ceremony in the Northern Territories, the night when unmated. Wolves gathered under the full moon's light, and alphas called upon their inner beasts to identify their destined mates. Nessa stood at the very back of the assembled females, as far from the center as she could manage, without actually leaving the sacred circle. She had learned long ago to make herself small, to take up as little space as possible, to breathe quietly and move like a shadow. It was the only way to survive when you were wolfless in a world that measured worth by the strength of your beast. The other females glittered in the moonlight, their ceremonial gowns chosen to highlight their best features, their hair arranged in elaborate styles that had taken hours to perfect. Omegas wore silver to signify their rarity and desirability. Betas wore deep blue to showcase their strength and capability. Even the lowest-ranked wolves wore something that marked them as part of the pack, as belonging. Nessa wore gray, the color of nothing, the color of absence. It was not truly a ceremonial gown at all, just the least worn of her daily dresses, because no one had thought to provide her with anything better. No one expected her to be chosen. No one expected her to matter. She was only here because pack law required all unmated females of age to attend, and even being wolfless did not excuse her from that obligation. Around her, the females whispered and giggled, speculating about which alphas might claim them, what it would feel like when the mate bond snapped into place, whether they would be swept off to grand pack houses or distant territories. Nessa kept her eyes down and tried not to listen, tried not to think about the fact that she would never know those things, never feel that connection, never be wanted in that way. A hush fell over the crowd, sudden and complete, and Nessa felt the shift in the air before she heard the footsteps. Power rolled across the ceremonial grounds like a physical wave, making her skin prickle and her breath catch. She did not need to look up to know who had arrived. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew of Alpha King Cade Theron, the ruler of the 7 packs, the wolf whose dominance was so absolute that even other alphas lowered their eyes in his presence. He had united the territories 5 years ago after decades of war, had brought peace through a combination of strategic brilliance and sheer overwhelming force. He was 30 years old and unmated, which was unusual for an alpha of his power and status. Rumors said he had rejected dozens of potential matches, that he was waiting for his true mate, that he would accept nothing less than the bond the moon goddess herself had written into his soul. Other rumors, whispered in darker corners, said he was incapable of forming the mate bond at all, that his wolf was too dominant, too wild, too consumed by the need for power to ever submit to the vulnerability that came with a true mating. Nessa risked a glance upward, and immediately wished she had not. Cade. Theron was not handsome in any conventional sense. His face was too hard, too angular, marked by a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a reminder of the battle that had made him king. His hair was dark as midnight and pulled back in a way that only emphasized the sharp, predatory lines of his features. But it was his eyes that made her breath stop. They were gold, bright as coins, bright as fire, the eyes of a wolf who had never known defeat. He moved through the assembled wolves with the unconscious grace of an apex predator, and the crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. He wore black, unadorned except for the silver sigil of the 7 packs on his chest, and he needed no other decoration. His presence was decoration enough. Power radiated from him in waves that made the lesser wolves tremble, and even the alphas in attendance shift uneasily. Elder Moira stepped forward, her ceremonial staff striking the ground 3 times, the sound echoing in the unnatural silence. Alpha King Cade Theron of the 7 packs. You honor us with your presence at our ritual of the crimson moon. Do you come seeking your true mate, as the ancient laws allow?" Her voice was formal, ritualistic, the same words that had been spoken at these ceremonies for 1,000 years. Cade's gaze swept over the assembled females, and Nessa felt rather than saw the way the other girls straightened, pushing their shoulders back, tilting their chins up, desperate to catch his attention. His expression remained completely neutral, revealing nothing. "I come seeking what the moon goddess has written for me," he said, and his voice was deep and rough, the voice of someone who did not waste words. "If my mate stands within this circle, my wolf will know her." The ritual was always the same. The unmated alpha would stand in the center of the sacred circle, would close his eyes and call upon his wolf, would let the beast rise close enough to the surface that it could sense, could feel the pull of the destined bond. Sometimes the pull was immediate and obvious, the alpha's wolf surging forward with such force that the shift was nearly involuntary, dragging the alpha toward his mate with the inevitability of the tide. Sometimes it was subtler, a gentle tug, a whisper of recognition that grew stronger as the alpha moved closer to the right female. And sometimes, most often, there was nothing. No pull, no recognition, no mate within the assembled wolves. Those were the ceremonies that ended quietly, with the alpha thanking the pack for their hospitality and moving on, still searching. Nessa had attended 3 of these rituals since coming of age, and she had never felt even a flicker of hope. She attended because she had to, because the alternative was punishment for disobeying pack law. But she knew with absolute certainty that no alpha would ever claim her. You could not form a mate bond with a wolf that did not exist. Cade walked to the center of the circle, his footsteps absolutely silent despite his size. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the build of a warrior who had earned every muscle through actual combat rather than training exercises. The moonlight caught on his face, highlighting the scar, and for just a moment his eyes flicked toward the back of the assembly, toward where Nessa stood half hidden behind a taller beta female. Their gazes met for the space of a single heartbeat, and Nessa felt something twist in her chest, something she could not name and did not want to examine. Then his eyes moved on, and she told herself she had imagined it, that there was no reason the Alpha King would notice her, no reason at all. Elder Moira raised her staff again. "Let the ritual of recognition begin. May the moon goddess guide your wolf to the mate she has chosen for you." Cade closed his eyes. The change that came over him was immediate and visceral. His shoulders tensed, his hands curling into fists at his sides, and the air around him seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. Nessa could feel his wolf rising, could sense the massive presence of it even without being able to see it. Around her, the other females held their breath, waiting, hoping. Several of them had already started to smile, confident that they would be chosen, that their beauty or their bloodline or their rank would be enough. Nessa found herself holding her breath too, though she could not have said why. There was a strange sensation building in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the night air, a pulling that felt almost like hunger, but sweeter, deeper, more fundamental. Then everything went wrong. Or perhaps everything went right in a way that no one could have anticipated. Cade's eyes snapped open, and the gold of his irises had been consumed by something brighter, something that glowed with its own internal light. His wolf was at the surface, closer than it should have been possible to bring the beast without actually shifting. A growl rumbled through his chest, low and continuous, and it was not a sound of aggression, but of recognition, of finding, of claiming. The assembled wolves waited for him to move forward, to stride toward whichever female his wolf had identified. But he did not move. He stood frozen in the center of the circle, his expression a mixture of shock and something that might have been disbelief. His gaze was fixed on a point at the back of the assembly, and slowly, with the careful precision of someone who does not trust what they are seeing, He turned his head. Nessa felt the moment his eyes locked on her. It was like being struck by lightning, like every nerve in her body catching fire simultaneously. The warmth in her chest exploded into something overwhelming, something that made her gasp and stumble backward. But there was nowhere to stumble to, because something was behind her. Something vast and present and powerful. She could not see it, but she could feel it. A presence that radiated heat and strength and an impossible sense of recognition. It was as if the air itself had solidified into a shape, as if moonlight had taken form, and that form was standing directly at her back, so close that if she leaned backward even an inch she would touch it. The murmurs started then, confused and uncertain, spreading through the crowd like ripples on water. Cade took a step toward her, then another, his movement slow and deliberate, as if he were approaching something fragile that might shatter. His wolf was still visible in his eyes, still glowing with that uncanny light. And it was not pulling him toward the beautiful Omega in silver, or the strong Beta in blue, or any of the females who had spent hours preparing for this moment. It was pulling him toward Nessa, toward the wolfless girl in gray who stood at the back of everything, invisible and unremarkable and utterly impossible. No. The word came from somewhere in the crowd, sharp with disbelief. That cannot be right. She does not even have a wolf. There must be some mistake. But Cade was not looking at anyone else. His gaze remained locked on Nessa, and the expression on his face was one she could not decipher. Not disgust, which she had expected. Not disappointment or anger. Something else entirely. Something that looked almost like wonder, as if he were seeing something miraculous and terrifying in equal measure. He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the way his jaw was clenched, the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands as if he were fighting to keep control. When he spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw by whatever he was feeling. You. Just that one word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 questions. Nessa could not speak, could not move. The presence behind her was still there, still impossibly real, and she had the strangest sensation that if she turned around, if she actually looked at what was standing at her back, everything would change in ways she could not begin to predict. Cade's eyes flicked over her shoulder, and his expression shifted into something harder, more fierce. My wolf, he said slowly, as if testing the words, is not with me. The crowd gasped, the sound sharp and collective. An alpha's wolf was never separate from the alpha himself. It was an internal presence, a part of the soul, as fundamental as breathing. For an alpha's wolf to manifest separately was not just unusual, it was impossible. It violated every law of nature that governed their kind. And yet Nessa could feel it, could sense the massive lupine presence at her back, could feel the heat of it radiating against her spine. Cade took another step closer, and now there was barely a foot of space between them. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, even more impossible to process. His scent washed over her, pine and smoke and something wild and dark that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. My wolf, he repeated, his voice dropping to something that was almost a whisper, intimate and rough and edged with an emotion she could not name, is standing behind you. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The implications of what he was saying crashed through the assembly like a shockwave. Nessa felt her knees go weak, felt the blood drain from her face. It was not possible. It could not be possible. She was wolfless, had been wolfless her entire life, had been tested and examined and confirmed to lack the most fundamental aspect of what made them what they were. There was no reason, no logic, no explanation for why the Alpha King's wolf would recognize her as anything, let alone as the mate his soul had been searching for. Elder Moira pushed through the crowd, her face a mixture of outrage and confusion. "Alpha King, this must be some mistake. This girl has no wolf. She has been tested multiple times. She cannot possibly be your mate. The bond requires both wolves to recognize each other, and she has nothing to recognize you with." Cade did not look away from Nessa, did not acknowledge the elder's words. His hand lifted slowly, carefully, and his fingers brushed against her cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone who radiated such raw power. The touch sent electricity racing down her spine, made that warmth in her chest flare into something bright and urgent and consuming. She felt her eyes widen, felt her breath catch, and saw the answering reaction in his gaze. Recognition. The mate bond, snapping into place like a key turning in a lock, like two halves of a whole finally finding each other after being separated for eternity. "She has a wolf," Cade said quietly, but his voice carried in the absolute silence that had fallen over the ceremonial grounds. "My wolf would not lie to me. My wolf knows its mate." He paused, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "The question is why I can sense her wolf, why my wolf can stand beside her when she cannot feel it herself." His eyes narrowed slightly, and she saw his nostrils flare as he scented the air around her. "There is magic here. Old magic. Binding magic." His gaze shifted to Elder Moira, and there was nothing gentle in it now, nothing tender. "Tell me, Elder, what happened to this girl? Why would someone seal away her wolf?" The Elder's face had gone pale, her hands tightening on her ceremonial staff until her knuckles showed white. "I do not know what you are talking about, Alpha King. The girl was simply born defective. It happens sometimes. A genetic flaw that prevents the wolf from manifesting. There is no magic involved, no sealing, no conspiracy. But there was something in her voice, some tiny hesitation, some flicker of knowledge quickly suppressed, and Cade's expression hardened into something dangerous. He took a step toward the Elder, and the movement was predatory, absolutely controlled, but carrying with it the implicit threat of violence. "You are lying." His voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he had shouted. "I can smell the lie on you. I can hear it in your heartbeat. You know something about what was done to her, and you are going to tell me. Now." The crowd shifted uneasily, wolves backing away from the confrontation, uncertain what was happening, but able to sense that something fundamental had just broken open. Some secret that had been kept for too long was about to spill into the light. Nessa's mind was reeling, unable to process what was happening. Magic? Sealing? She knew nothing about any of this. She had always been told she was simply born wrong, born lacking, born with a defect that could not be fixed. But if what Cade was saying was true, if her wolf had not failed to manifest, but had been deliberately locked away, then everything she thought she knew about herself was a lie. Everything she had suffered, every humiliation, every moment of being treated as less than, as broken, as worthless, had been based on a deception. Elder Moira's composure finally cracked. Her expression shifted from feigned confusion to something colder, more calculating. "Even if what you say is true, Alpha King, it changes nothing. The girl's wolf is sealed for a reason. There are those who would kill her if they knew what she truly was. The sealing was done to protect her, to keep her hidden, to ensure she survived long enough to reach maturity. Breaking the seal now would only paint a target on her back." Cade's growl was low and continuous, a sound of pure alpha dominance that made several of the weaker wolves in the crowd drop to their knees involuntarily. "You do not get to make that choice. She is my mate, my queen, and I will not have her walking through." This world crippled, unable to access her own power, unable to defend herself or feel the bond properly because you decided to play puppet master with her life. Nessa found her voice finally, though it came out smaller than she wanted, shakier. "What am I?" The question was directed at Moira, at this woman who had known her entire life, who had tested her as a child and pronounced her wolfless, who had watched her be mocked and marginalized, and had never once hinted that there was more to the story. If my wolf is sealed, if there is magic involved, then someone did this to me deliberately. Someone knew. So tell me, Elder, what am I that is so dangerous I had to be hidden even from myself? The Elder's jaw worked silently for a moment, her eyes darting between Nessa and Cade as if calculating which truth would do less damage. Finally, she seemed to deflate slightly, the weight of years of secret keeping pressing down on her shoulders. "You are Lunaris," she said quietly, and the word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. "The last of the lunar bloodline. Your parents were murdered 15 years ago in a coordinated attack meant to wipe out the entire lineage. You were only 3 years old when they found you in the ruins of your family's compound. The only survivor. The pack that took you in, that raised you. They sealed your wolf to hide what you were. The Lunaris wolves have been extinct for 2 centuries, hunted to the brink by those who feared their power. If anyone knew you carried that blood, that you were not just Lunaris, but potentially the heir to the entire bloodline, they would finish what was started 15 years ago." The revelation hit Nessa like a physical blow. Lunaris. She had heard the name in old stories, legends about white wolves who could channel the moon's power directly, who could heal with a touch or kill with a thought, who were said to be blessed by the moon goddess herself. But they were myths, fairy tales, bloodlines that had died out long before she was born. Except they had not died out. They had been murdered, hunted, and she was what remained. Cade's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with a certainty that grounded her when she felt like she might simply float away from the unreality of it all. Who sealed her wolf? His voice was still hard, still edged with that dangerous calm. Who performed the binding? Moira hesitated, then seemed to realize that there was no point in protecting anyone. Now, not when the Alpha King was involved, not when the mate bond had already been established. "I did, along with 2 other elders who have since passed. We used an ancient ritual, one that was supposed to suppress her wolf until she reached her 25th year. At that point, the seal was designed to begin weakening naturally, to give her time to adjust as her wolf slowly emerged. But we did not account for the mate bond." Her gaze shifted to where Cade stood, his presence still radiating. That overwhelming power. "We did not anticipate that an alpha of your strength would recognize her before the seal had time to break on its own. Your wolf is calling to hers, pulling at the binding, and that is why you can sense her beast when she cannot." Cade's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they were filled with a cold fury that made the temperature around them seem to drop. "You crippled my mate. You took away her ability to shift, to run, to feel the moon's pull, to experience half of what she is. And you did it without her knowledge, without her consent, without giving her any choice in the matter." His voice was getting quieter, more controlled, which somehow made it more frightening. "I understand you thought you were protecting her. I even understand that your intentions may have been good. But you still stole 15 years of her life. 15 years where she was treated as broken, as less than, as unworthy. When the truth is that she carries one of the most powerful bloodlines ever to exist." Nessa's mind was still trying to catch up, still trying to process the enormity of what she was learning. Lunaris. Heir to a murdered bloodline. Sealed wolf. Mate to the Alpha King. It was too much. Too fast. Too overwhelming. She pulled her hand from Cade's grip, took a step back, then another. The presence behind her, the invisible weight of his wolf, moved with her, staying close, protective. "I need," she started, then stopped, her voice breaking. "I cannot. This is too much. I do not even know who I am anymore." Tears were burning behind her eyes, threatening to fall, and she refused to let them, refused to show that weakness in front of all these watching wolves. She had spent her entire life being strong, being silent, surviving by making herself invisible. And now she was being told that everything she had endured was unnecessary, was based on a lie, was the result of a decision made by others for reasons she had never been consulted about. Cade took a step toward her, his hand extending as if to touch her again. But she flinched back and saw something that might have been pain flash across his face. Nessa. Her name in his voice was gentle, careful, so different from the hard authority he had used with the elder. I know this is overwhelming. I know you need time to process. But I need you to understand something. He waited until she met his eyes, until she was looking directly at him. You are my mate. My wolf recognized you the moment I entered this circle, and nothing about what you were told changes that. Wolfless or Lunaris or anything in between, you are mine, and I am yours. That is written in our souls, and no seal, no magic, no lie can alter it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the certainty he seemed to have about this impossible bond. But all she could feel was the absence, the hollow place inside her where her wolf should have been, the emptiness that had defined her for as long as she could remember. I cannot feel it, she whispered. The bond. I know you can sense it. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you look at me. But I cannot feel anything except confusion and fear and anger. How am I supposed to be your mate when I cannot even access the most basic part of what that means? Cade's expression softened further, and he moved slowly, telegraphing his intention before he reached for her again. This time she did not pull away when his hand cupped her cheek, when his thumb brushed away a tear she had not realized had fallen. Then we break the seal. We give you back what was taken from you. And we do it now, tonight, before anyone who might want you dead learns that you still exist. Elder Moira made a sound of protest. The seal was designed to break slowly for a reason. If you shatter it all at once, the shock could kill her. Her wolf has been dormant for 15 years. Releasing it suddenly could overwhelm her system, could tear her apart from the inside. Cade did not look away from Nessa, did not acknowledge the elder's warning except to say, Then I will be there to anchor her. My wolf is already connected to hers. I can feel the bond pulling between us even through the seal. If her wolf emerges too fast, too strong, I will be there to help her control it, to guide her through the shift, to make sure she survives the awakening. He paused, his eyes searching hers. But it has to be your choice. I will not force this. If you want to. Wait. If you want the seal to break naturally over time, I will protect you while you adjust. I will take you out of this pack, bring you to my territory where you will be safe, and we will deal with your wolf when it is ready to emerge. But if you want to know, if you want to feel what you have been denied your entire life, then I can make that happen tonight. The choice hung between them, heavy and impossible. Safety, in slow revelation, or the risk of immediate transformation. Continued. Emptiness, or the chance to finally feel whole. Nessa looked at Cade, at this man who was supposedly her mate, this stranger who looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered, like she was something more than the broken, worthless thing she had always believed herself to be. She thought about the invisible presence still standing at her back, about the way his wolf had manifested beside her when it should have been impossible. She thought about 15 years of humiliation, of being less than, of believing there was something fundamentally wrong with her. And she made her choice. Break the seal. Her voice was steady now, certain. I want my wolf back. I want to know who I really am. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Cade's expression shifted into something fierce and proud, and he turned to Elder Moira with the full weight of his authority. You will tell me exactly how to break the binding. Every word of the ritual, every component, every gesture. And you will do it now, or I will have you arrested for conspiracy and magical assault against a member of the royal bloodline. The threat was not empty, and everyone present knew it. Moira's face had gone ashen, but she nodded slowly. The seal is tied to 3 anchor points: her mind, her heart, and her soul. Each anchor must be released in sequence, and each release requires a catalyst. For the mind, she must remember her true name, the name she was given at birth. Before the sealing. For the heart, she must accept the mate bond fully, without reservation or doubt. And for the soul, she must call to her wolf directly, must invite it to emerge and reclaim its place within her. Cade listened intently, his expression growing darker with each requirement. Her true name. You expect her to remember something from when she was 3 years old? Moira shook her head. The name is part of the seal itself. When I speak the words to begin the breaking, the memory will surface. It has been locked away, protected, waiting for this moment. She took a breath, seemed to steady herself. But Alpha King, you must understand. Once this begins, it cannot be stopped. If she fails any of the 3 releases, if she cannot remember, or cannot accept, or cannot call, the seal will not break cleanly. It will shatter, and the feedback will likely kill her. This is why we designed it to dissolve slowly, safely, over months, rather than moments. Nessa felt ice slide down her spine, but she did not let it show on her face. I understand the risks. Do it anyway. Cade's hand found hers again, squeezing gently. I will be with you through every moment. My wolf will anchor yours. You will not face this alone. The certainty in his voice should not have been comforting, coming from someone she had known for less than an hour. But somehow it was. Somehow, despite everything, she trusted him. Or perhaps she trusted the invisible presence at her back, the manifestation of his wolf that had recognized her before she had known there was anything to recognize. Elder Moira began to prepare, gathering items from a ceremonial chest that had been brought for the ritual. Herbs that smelled of moonlight and frost, a silver blade that glowed with its own internal luminescence, a bowl carved from white stone that seemed to drink in the light around it. The other wolves had backed away, forming a wide circle around the 3 of them, watching with a mixture of fear and fascination. This was not how the ritual of the Crimson Moon was supposed to go. This was not how any of this was supposed to go. But Nessa found she did not care about tradition or expectation, or what was supposed to happen. All she cared about was the possibility, however remote, however dangerous, of finally being whole. Moira began to chant, words in a language Nessa did not recognize, old and rhythmic and filled with power. The air around them began to shimmer, began to thicken, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate what was about to happen. Cade pulled Nessa closer, his arms coming around her from behind, his chest solid and warm against her back. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, could feel the way his breathing matched hers, could feel the mate bond beginning to pulse between them, even though she still could not sense it fully. First anchor, Moira said, her voice cutting through the chanting. The name that was sealed, the name that carries the weight of her bloodline. Remember, child. Remember who you were before fear made you forget. Nessa closed her eyes, reaching for memories that should not exist, that had been locked away for 15 years. At first there was nothing, just darkness and the distant echo of her own heartbeat. But then something shifted, some barrier crumbling, and images began to flood through her mind. A woman with white blonde hair and silver eyes, singing a lullaby in that same ancient language Moira was using. A man with the same sharp features Nessa saw in her own reflection, laughing as he tossed a small child into the air. And a name, whispered with such love, such pride, such hope for the future. Kilara. The name left her lips without conscious thought, pulled from some deep place within her that had been waiting to be found. My name is Kilara Lunaris. The moment the name was spoken, something inside her shifted. Not broke, not yet, but loosened, like the first knot in a tangle of rope. Coming free. She gasped, and Cade's arms tightened around her, holding her steady. Good, he murmured against her ear. You are doing perfectly. 1 anchor down, 2 to go. Moira's chanting intensified, the ancient words flowing faster, and the shimmer in the air became visible silver light, threads of magic that connected Nessa to something larger, something that had been waiting patiently for her to reclaim it. 2nd anchor, Moira said. The heart, the bond, the connection that ties you. To your mate, to your other half, to the wolf who stands guardian over your own. You must accept it fully, without reservation, without fear. You must open yourself to what it means, to what it will require of you. Nessa felt panic rising in her chest. How was she supposed to accept something she could not even feel? How was she supposed to open herself to a bond that existed for him, but remained invisible to her? Cade seemed to sense her fear, seemed to feel it through whatever connection they shared. Listen to me, he said softly, his lips close to her ear. I know you cannot feel the bond the way I can, but you can feel this. His hand moved to rest over her heart, his palm warm against her chest. You can feel the way your heart races when I touch you. You can feel the warmth that spreads through you when our eyes meet. You can feel the way something inside you recognizes me, even if you do not have the words for it yet. That is the bond. That is what connects us. Trust in that. Trust in what your body knows, even if your mind cannot explain it. She turned her head slightly, enough to see his face in profile, to see the absolute certainty in his expression. He believed this, believed in her, in them, in the connection that fate or the moon goddess or pure chance had written between them. And maybe that was enough. Maybe belief was a choice as much as a feeling. Maybe acceptance was not about understanding everything, but about being willing to take the leap. Anyway, to trust in something larger than logic or reason. She took a breath, deep and slow, and let herself feel it. The warmth in her chest that had started the moment Cade's eyes met hers. The electricity that raced along her skin when he touched her. The way her wolf, sealed and silent though it was, seemed to strain toward him like a flower turning toward the sun. The recognition that went deeper than thought, deeper than conscious awareness. I accept it, she said clearly, and meant it. I accept the mate bond. I accept you. I accept what fate has written for us. The 2nd anchor broke with an almost audible snap, and this time the pain was real. It felt like something tearing inside her chest, like chains that had been there so long she had forgotten they existed suddenly being ripped away. She cried out, her body arching, and Cade held her through it, his voice a steady stream of reassurance in her ear, telling her she was strong, she was brave, she was doing everything right. The silver light around them flared brighter, so bright that she could see it even through her closed eyelids, and she felt something change in the space between her and Cade. The bond, invisible before, suddenly became tangible. Not fully open, not complete, but present. A golden thread connecting her heart to his, pulsing with warmth and recognition, and the beginning of something that felt like it could consume her entire world if she let it. Moira's voice cut through the haze of sensation. 3rd anchor, the soul, the wolf herself. You must call to her, child. You must invite her back, must ask her to remember, must give her permission to return. She has been sleeping for so long, dreaming in the darkness, waiting. Call her name, call her home. Nessa did not know her wolf's name, had never known it, had never even considered that her wolf might have a name separate from her own. But as she reached inward, as she dove down into that hollow place where her wolf should have been. She found that she did know, had always known, on some level too deep for conscious thought. The knowledge had been there all along, sealed but not destroyed, waiting for this exact moment. Arya. The name was a whisper, barely audible even to her own ears. Arya, I need you. I am sorry I forgot you. I am sorry I could not feel you, could not know you were there. But I am calling you now. I am asking you to come back. Please, help me be whole again. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silver light continued to pulse and swirl. Cade's arms remained solid around her. The crowd watched in breathless silence. And then something stirred in that hollow place. Something that had been dormant for 15 years. Something powerful and ancient, and utterly, completely hers. She felt her wolf wake up, felt consciousness that was not her own, but was intrinsically connected to her own beginning to surface from the depths, where it had been locked away. Arya, her wolf, her other half. Awakening. The pain that followed was beyond anything she could have prepared for. It felt like her entire body was being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously, like every cell was screaming in protest and joy at the same time. Her wolf was emerging, pushing against the final anchor, demanding release, demanding freedom, demanding the right to run and hunt and be after 15 years of forced sleep. Nessa screamed, could not help it, and Cade's grip tightened to the point of pain. Grounding her, giving her something to hold on to as her world dissolved into sensation. She felt her bones beginning to shift, felt the first touch of the change rippling under her skin, and panic surged through her because she did not know how to do this, did not know how to shift, had never felt this before, and had no idea how to control it. I have you. Cade's voice cut through the chaos, calm and absolute. My wolf has yours. Let her guide you. Let the bond show you what to do. You do not have to know. You just have to trust. And there it was again. Trust. The foundation of everything that was happening. The only anchor that mattered when all the others had been broken. She trusted him. Trusted his wolf. The invisible presence that had been standing guard at her back since the moment of recognition. Trusted the bond that pulsed between them, golden and warm and growing stronger with every passing second. She let go of the fear, let go of the need to control, and simply surrendered to what was happening. The shift, when it finally completed, was both agony and ecstasy. One moment she was human, the next she was wolf, and the transformation happened so fast that her mind barely had time to register the change before it was done. She stood on 4 legs instead of 2, her senses exploding into a richness she had never imagined. She could smell everything, could hear the heartbeat of every wolf in the assembly, could see in shades and depths that her human eyes had never accessed. And she could feel her wolf, Arya, fully present and aware, a consciousness that was separate from her own, but perfectly synchronized with it. 2 beings sharing one body in absolute harmony. The first thing Arya did was turn to look at the wolf standing beside her, massive and midnight dark, with eyes that glowed gold in the moonlight. Cade had shifted at some point during her transformation, had let his own wolf emerge to be there for hers, and the sight of him took her breath away. He was enormous, easily twice her size, with fur that seemed to drink in the light, and a presence that radiated dominance and power, an absolute unwavering focus. Their wolves circled each other once, a dance as old as time, recognition and claim and acceptance all wrapped into a single moment. Then Cade's wolf lowered his head, an unmistakable gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, and Nessa felt Arya respond with a surge of emotion so strong it almost knocked her off her feet. The mate bond, already present, suddenly completed, snapped into place with a force that sent shockwaves through both of them. binding them together in a way that went deeper than flesh, deeper than thought, deeper than anything except perhaps the soul itself. She could feel him now, feel his emotions as clearly as her own, feel his wolf's absolute devotion and fierce protectiveness, feel the way he saw her, not as broken or lesser or wolfless, but as precious, as powerful, as perfect. The crowd gasped, and Nessa realized with a start that she could see herself reflected in their eyes, could see what they were seeing. She was white, pure white, from the tip of her nose to the end of her tail, with fur that seemed to glow with its own internal luminescence. Lunaris white, the color of moonlight made solid, the mark of a bloodline that had been thought extinct for 200 years. Silver eyes gazed back at her from 100 shocked faces, and she understood in that moment why the seal had been necessary, why they had hidden her so thoroughly. A wolf like her could not simply blend into a pack. A wolf like her was unmistakable, unforgettable, a beacon that would draw attention from every corner of the territories, both those who would revere her and those who would want her dead. Cade's wolf moved closer, his shoulder brushing against hers, and she felt the steady pulse of the bond between them, reassuring and solid. He would protect her. His pack would protect her. She was no longer alone, no longer vulnerable, no longer the powerless girl who had attended the ritual expecting nothing. She was Kailara Lunaris, heir to an ancient bloodline, mate to the Alpha King, and she had her wolf back. Everything else, all the danger and politics and complications that would surely follow, they would face together. She looked up at the full moon hanging heavy and bright in the sky above them, and for the first time in her life, she felt its pull, felt the way her wolf responded to it, felt the power that hummed through her veins, old and patient and vast. She threw back her head and howled, a sound of pure joy and freedom and triumph. And Cade's wolf joined her, their voices rising together in a harmony that seemed to shake the very air. The ritual was complete, the seal was broken, and the Alpha King had found his queen. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The days that followed were a blur of activity and revelation. Cade wasted no time in claiming Nessa formally, marking her publicly as his mate and future queen before the assembled packs. The ceremony was brief, but binding, his teeth sinking into the curve where her neck met her shoulder, the claiming bite that would tell every wolf who saw her that she was taken, protected, utterly off-limits to anyone who might have ideas about challenging the bond. Nessa wore the mark with pride, felt the way it pulsed in rhythm with the mate bond, a constant reminder that she was no longer alone in the world. He took her to his territory immediately after, unwilling to leave her in a pack that had hidden her true nature for 15 years. The journey took 2 days by car, and Nessa spent most of it in a daze, trying to adjust to the constant presence of Arya in her mind, the way her senses were sharper now, the way she could feel Cade's emotions bleeding through the bond, even when he was sitting across from her in silence. His territory was vast, encompassing 3 of the 7 packs, and protected by some of the most skilled warriors in existence. The pack house itself was a sprawling estate built into the side of a mountain, with views that stretched for miles in every direction. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, and Nessa felt a flutter of anxiety as they pulled through the gates. This was supposed to be her home now. These wolves were supposed to be her pack. But she had spent 15 years being invisible, insignificant, and the thought of suddenly being thrust into the role of queen was overwhelming. Cade seemed to sense her nervousness. He had been remarkably attuned to her emotional state since the bond completed, able to read her moods with an accuracy that should have been unsettling but instead felt comforting. "You do not have to be perfect," he said quietly, as they walked through the grand entrance of the pack house. "You do not have to know everything immediately. My pack will respect you. Because you are my mate, but they will love you for who you are. Give yourself time to adjust. Give yourself permission to learn. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that it would be that simple. But she had learned long ago that respect was earned, not given, and being mated to the Alpha King would only buy her so much goodwill before she had to prove herself worthy of the position. The pack's reaction to her was cautious, but curious. Word had already spread about what had happened at Tew. The ritual, about the wolfless girl who turned out to be Lunaris, about the mate bond that had manifested in such an unusual way. Wolves gathered in the common areas to catch a glimpse of her, their eyes following her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Some whispered when they thought she could not hear. Speculation about whether she could truly handle the responsibilities of being queen. Whether her sealed wolf would make her weak. Whether Cade had made a mistake in claiming someone so unknown. She heard it all, her enhanced senses picking up conversations from rooms away, and she forced herself to hold her head high, to meet their gazes without flinching, to project a confidence she did not entirely feel. Cade introduced her to his inner circle over dinner that first night. His beta, Marcus, was a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a steady presence that immediately put her at ease. His gamma, Sienna, was a woman in her 40s with silver streaking through her dark hair, and an intelligence that shone in every word she spoke. There were others, advisors and warriors and pack leaders, all of them watching her with varying degrees of interest and judgment. The meal was formal, structured, nothing like the casual pack dinners she remembered from her childhood before everything had fallen apart. Conversation flowed around topics she barely understood, politics and trade agreements and border disputes, and she found herself mostly silent, absorbing information and trying to figure out where she fit into all of this. Midway through the meal, Sienna turned to her directly. "Tell me, Luna, what do you know of pack management? Of the laws that govern our territories?" The question was not hostile, but it was pointed, a test disguised as polite inquiry. Nessa met the woman's gaze steadily. "Very little," she admitted, seeing no point in pretending otherwise. "I was raised in a small pack, kept isolated, taught nothing of leadership or governance. I am aware that my ignorance is a liability, and I intend to remedy it as quickly as possible. But I will not pretend to knowledge I do not have. If I am to be your queen, you deserve honesty at minimum." The table went quiet, wolves exchanging glances, and Nessa felt her stomach tighten, certain she had said the wrong thing. But then Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "Well, at least we know where we stand. I will take honest ignorance over false confidence any day." Sienna's expression softened slightly, and she nodded. "Agreed. We can teach you what you need to know, Luna. But we cannot teach integrity, and it seems you already have that in abundance." The tension in the room eased, and conversation resumed, this time with several of the advisors offering to help her learn about various aspects of pack leadership. Cade's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently, and through the bond she felt his approval, his pride in how she had handled the challenge. It was a small victory, but it mattered. It meant she could do this, could learn to navigate this world she had been so suddenly thrust into, could become the queen these wolves needed even if she had no idea what she was doing right now. The real complications began a week later, when word of her existence spread beyond Cade's territory and reached the ears of those who still carried old grudges against the Lunaris bloodline. The first threat came in the form of a letter, delivered by messenger and written in blood on parchment that reeked of dark magic. The message was simple and chilling. The Lunaris line was eradicated for a reason. We will finish what was started. Every day you draw breath is an insult to those who died ensuring your kind would never rise again. Cade read the letter with an expression of cold fury, then immediately doubled the guards around the pack house and restricted Nessa's movements until they could determine who had sent it. She hated the confinement, hated feeling like a prisoner in what was supposed to be her home. but she understood the necessity. Someone out there wanted her dead, and until they knew who and how many, caution was the only reasonable response. The second threat was more direct. 3 days after the letter arrived, an assassination attempt was made during a public appearance at one of the smaller packs within Cade's territory. Nessa had been greeting pack members, trying to build relationships and show that she was approachable despite her bloodline and her position, when a young male suddenly lunged from the crowd with a silver blade aimed directly at her heart. The attack happened so fast that her human reflexes barely registered it, but Arya was faster. Her wolf surged to the surface in a partial shift, giving her the speed and strength to dodge, and the instinct to counterattack. She caught the male's wrist mid-strike, twisted with a force that made bones crack, and had him on the ground with her hand around his throat before the guards could even reach them. The would-be assassin was young, barely 20, and his eyes were filled with a fanaticism that made her stomach turn. "Lunaris witch," he spat, struggling uselessly against her grip. "Your family murdered mine. Your bloodline is cursed. You deserve to die screaming like my grandmother did when your father tore her pack apart." Nessa felt Cade's presence before she saw him, felt his rage through the bond like a living thing. He pulled her back gently but firmly, putting himself between her and the assassin, and the look he gave the young male was absolutely lethal. "Take him to the cells. Find out who sent him, who taught him to hate, who gave him the weapon and the opportunity, and then we will discuss appropriate consequences for attempting to murder the queen." The incident shook Nessa more than she wanted to admit. She had known intellectually that there would be those who opposed her, who saw her bloodline as a threat or a reminder of old conflicts. But knowing it and experiencing it were different things entirely. That night, alone in the rooms she shared with Cade, she finally let the composure crack. "He was so young," she whispered, staring at her hands as if she could still see the blood that had not actually been spilled. "He truly believed I deserved to die, that my family were monsters. And maybe they were. How am I supposed to know? I do not remember them. Do not know what they did or did not do. What if he was right? What if the Lunaris bloodline was eradicated because we were dangerous, because we abused our power?" Cade pulled her into his arms, his touch grounding her the way it always did. The Lunaris were hunted because people feared what they could not control. Your family had power, yes, but every account I have found suggests they used it to protect, to heal, to maintain balance. The packs that destroyed them did so out of ambition and fear, not justice. And even if your ancestors made mistakes, even if they were not perfect, that does not define you. You are not responsible for what others did generations ago. You are only responsible for who you choose to be now. His words helped, but the fear remained, a constant whisper in the back of her mind. What if more came? What if the threats never stopped? What if loving her put Cade and his pack in danger? As if reading her thoughts, he tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I chose you. Knowing what you are, knowing the complications it would bring, knowing that your bloodline would paint a target on both our backs. I chose you anyway, because you are my mate, and there is nothing in this world more important than that. We will face the threats together. We will protect each other, and anyone foolish enough to try to hurt you will learn exactly why I am called the Alpha King." The ferocity in his voice, the absolute certainty, made her chest ache. She had spent 15 years believing she was worthless, believing no one would ever want her. And now here was this impossibly powerful man telling her she was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth keeping despite every complication her existence brought with it. The interrogation of the young assassin revealed a network of wolves who still clung to old hatreds, who believed the Lunaris bloodline was a threat that needed to be eliminated before it could rise to power again. They were scattered across multiple territories, not organized enough to be called a true conspiracy, but connected enough to share information and resources. Cade spent weeks tracking down the threads, arresting those who had actively participated in plots against Nessa, and warning those who had simply spoken carelessly about their opinions. It was exhausting, dangerous work, and Nessa hated watching him put himself at risk because of her. But she also understood that this was part of what it meant to be queen, part of the responsibility she had accepted when she chose to break the seal and reclaim her wolf. In the midst of the political turmoil, Nessa threw herself into learning everything she could about being Luna. Sienna became her primary teacher, walking her through pack law and customs, explaining the delicate balance of power between the 7 packs, helping her understand the responsibilities she would be expected to shoulder. Marcus taught her combat, insisting that while Cade would always protect her, she needed to be able to defend herself as well. The training was brutal, her Lunaris bloodline giving her power, but not automatically granting her the skill to use it effectively. She spent hours each day learning to fight, in both human and wolf form, pushing her body to its limits, and then beyond. And slowly, gradually, she began to feel less like an imposter and more like someone who actually belonged in the role she had been thrust into. 3 months after the mate bond completed, Cade called a gathering of all 7 packs, a formal assembly where Nessa would be presented as queen and officially recognized by the pack leaders. It was a ceremony that had not been performed in over a decade, not since Cade himself had been crowned king, and the preparations were elaborate and stressful. Nessa spent weeks working with advisors on her speech, on the image she wanted to project, on the delicate political balance she would need to strike to win the respect of wolves who were still uncertain about her. The night before the ceremony, she could not sleep, her mind racing with everything that could go wrong, every way she might fail or embarrass herself or prove that the doubters were right to question whether she was fit to be queen. Cade found her standing on the balcony of their rooms, staring out at the moonlit mountains, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You are going to be magnificent tomorrow," he said quietly. "Not because you are perfect, but because you are real. Because you understand what it means to struggle, to be underestimated, to have to fight for every scrap of respect. The wolves who matter will see that. They will see your strength, your integrity, your refusal to pretend to be something you are not. And they will follow you not because you are my mate, but because you are worthy of being followed in your own right." She leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "What if I am not ready? What if I say the wrong thing? Do the wrong thing? Prove that I do not belong?" He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "Then you will learn from it, and you will do better next time. That is all anyone can ask. Perfection is not the standard here. Growth is." The ceremony itself was held in the great hall of the pack house, a massive space that could hold over 1,000 wolves. Every pack leader from the 7 territories was in attendance, along with their advisors and warriors and representatives. The atmosphere was charged, electric. Wolves from different packs eyeing each other with varying degrees of suspicion and respect. Nessa wore white, the color of her bloodline, a gown that had been crafted specifically for this moment with silver embroidery that caught the light and seemed to glow. Her hair was loose, cascading down her back in waves that Cade insisted made her look like moonlight given form. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like every eye in the room was judging her and finding her wanting. But she kept her head high, her shoulders back, and walked into that hall like she had every right to be there. Cade stood at the center of the raised platform, radiating authority and power, and when Nessa joined him, he took her hand in his, the gesture simple but meaningful. The room fell silent, hundreds of wolves waiting to see what would happen, how this would unfold. Cade spoke first, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the hall. "Wolves, of the 7 packs, I present to you Kailara Lunaris, my mate, and your queen. She comes to this position not through birth or expectation, but through fate and the will of the moon goddess. She carries a bloodline that many believed extinct, and her presence here is both a gift and a challenge. She will face opposition. She will face doubt. But I have seen her strength, her courage, her refusal to be broken by circumstances that would have destroyed a lesser wolf. And I am asking you to give her the chance to prove herself, to show you what I already know, that she is worthy of this crown, worthy of your respect, worthy of standing at my side as we lead our packs into the future. Then it was her turn, and Nessa felt her heart hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. But she had practiced this, had spent hours working on what she would say, and she forced herself to speak clearly, confidently. I know that many of you have questions about who I am, about my bloodline, about whether I can truly lead. I will not stand here and claim to have all the answers. I am still learning, still growing, still discovering what it means to be Lunaris and what it means to be queen. But I can promise you this: I will work every day to earn your trust. I will listen to your concerns, fight for your well-being, and stand beside you through whatever challenges we face. I am not asking you to love me, or even to like me. I am only asking you to give me the chance to prove that I am more than my bloodline, more than the girl who was sealed and hidden and told she was worthless. I am asking you to see me for who I am becoming, not who I was forced to be. The silence that followed her speech felt eternal, and she braced herself for rejection, for challenges, for the inevitable wolf who would stand up and declare that she had no right to this position. But instead, slowly, starting with Marcus and Sienna and spreading outward through the crowd, the wolves began to bow. Not a full submission, but a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, of willingness to give her the chance she had asked for. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, refused to show weakness in this moment of tentative acceptance. Cade's hand tightened around hers, and through the bond she felt his pride, his love, his absolute conviction that she belonged exactly where she was. The formal part of the ceremony concluded with the traditional oaths, each pack leader pledging their loyalty to the crown and to the queen who stood beside the king. It was ritualistic, binding, and by the time the last oath was spoken, Nessa felt the weight of it settling onto her shoulders. These wolves had accepted her. Not universally, not without reservation, but enough. Enough to give her a foundation to build on, enough to move forward. The celebration that followed was loud and chaotic. Wolves from different packs mixing and drinking and testing boundaries in the way that only happened when long-standing rivals were forced to be civil. Nessa moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and deflecting subtle challenges with as much grace as she could manage. She was exhausted by the time the evening ended, her face aching from smiling, her feet sore from standing, her mind buzzing with 1,000 conversations and interactions she would need to process later. Cade practically carried her back to their rooms, and she collapsed onto their bed with a groan of relief. "I survived," she said to the ceiling. "I actually survived that." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and stretched out beside her. "You did more than survive. You impressed them. I watched the pack leaders, saw the way they reacted to you. You won over more of them than I expected. And the ones who are still skeptical at least respect your honesty." She turned her head to look at him. This man who had changed her entire world in the span of a single night 3 months ago. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me when I could not believe in myself, for standing beside me through all of this, for being exactly what I needed even when I did not know I needed anything." His expression softened, and he reached over to brush a strand of hair from her face. "You do not need to thank me for loving you. That is not a burden or a favor. That is simply what you are to me. My mate, my queen, my other half. Everything I am, everything I have. It is yours." The words settled into her chest, warm and solid and true. And for the first time since the seal had broken, since her world had been turned upside down and inside out, Nessa felt peace. Not the absence of challenge or struggle, because she knew there would be more of both ahead, but peace in knowing that she was no longer alone, no longer fighting to prove her worth to a world that refused to see her. She had found her place, found her power, found the person who would stand beside her no matter what. Came next. The months that followed were not easy. There were more threats, more attempts to undermine her authority, more whispers that she was too young, too inexperienced, too damaged by her years of being sealed to truly lead. But for every challenge, there was also a victory. A pack that came to her for mediation and left satisfied with her judgment. A crisis that she handled with a combination of intuition and advice from her advisors that resulted in a peaceful resolution. Small moments, where she saw respect growing in the eyes of wolves who had doubted her. She learned to use her Lunaris abilities, discovered that she could heal minor injuries with a touch, could sense deception in a way that made her invaluable during negotiations, could channel the moon's power in ways that made even the strongest alphas pause. Her wolf, Arya, grew stronger every day, the bond between human and beast deepening into something unshakable. And through it all, there was Cade. Steady, patient, fierce when he needed to be, and gentle when she required softness. The mate bond between them evolved from recognition into genuine love, the kind built on shared struggle and mutual respect, and the 1,000 small moments that made up a life together. They fought sometimes, passionate disagreements about how to handle pack politics, or whether she was taking unnecessary risks. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that they were stronger together than apart. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, Nessa realized that she no longer thought of herself as the wolfless girl who had been sealed and hidden. She thought of herself as queen, as Lunaris, as someone who had earned her place through determination and growth. It was a subtle shift, an internal recognition that she had finally become the person she was always meant to be. The final threat came a year after the mate bond completed, in the form of a challenge from the remaining members of the conspiracy that had tried to eliminate the Lunaris bloodline. They had gathered their forces, wolves from over a dozen different packs who shared a common hatred for what Nessa represented, and they issued a formal challenge for control of the territories. It was within their rights under pack law, a mechanism designed to prevent stagnation and ensure that only the strongest led. Cade could have refused, could have declared the challenge illegitimate and dealt with them through force. But he knew that doing so would only create martyrs and prolong the conflict. So he accepted, with one condition. The challenge would be a formal trial by combat, but Nessa would fight alongside him. 2 against their champions, a mated pair defending their right to rule. The battles took place over 3 days in neutral territory, witnessed by representatives from every pack in the territories. Nessa fought with everything she had, her Lunaris abilities and her months of training combining into a fighting style that was uniquely her own. She was not the strongest or the fastest or the most experienced warrior on that field, but she was determined, and she had Cade fighting at her back, their bond allowing them to coordinate with a precision that their opponents could not match. They moved like parts of a whole, anticipating each other's actions, covering weaknesses, amplifying strengths. By the 3rd day, it was clear that the challenge had failed. The conspiracy's champions lay defeated, and Nessa stood, bloodied but unbroken in the center of the combat ring, her white wolf fur stained red, but her eyes still blazing with determination. The leader of the conspiracy, an old wolf named Gareth, who claimed his family had been destroyed by the Lunaris centuries ago, knelt in the dirt before her, defeated but not quite broken. "You fight well, for a Lunaris," he said, and there was grudging respect in his voice. "Perhaps you are not the monster I believed you to be." Nessa looked down at him. At this wolf who had spent years nurturing hatred for a bloodline he had never actually encountered, and felt something that might have been pity. "I am not my ancestors," she said quietly. "Whatever they did, whatever wrongs you believe they committed, they are not my burden to carry. I can only be responsible for my own actions, my own choices. And I choose to lead with justice, not revenge. I choose to build rather than destroy. If you can accept that, if you can let go of the hatred that has consumed you, then there is a place for you in these territories. But if you cannot, if you insist on clinging to old grudges, then you will be exiled. The choice is yours." Gareth stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then slowly, he bowed his head in genuine submission. "I accept your rule, Luna, and I will teach my pack to do the same." It was not forgiveness, not exactly. And Nessa knew there would always be some who could never truly let go of the past. But it was progress, a step toward healing old wounds, and that was enough. The trial by combat concluded with a formal recognition of Cade and Nessa's right to rule, and the wolves who had gathered to watch spread the word throughout the territories. The Lunaris Queen had proven herself in battle, had shown mercy to those who had tried to destroy her, and had earned the respect even of her enemies. The whispers changed after that, from doubt and suspicion to a cautious acceptance that perhaps, she was exactly what the territories needed. 2 years after the mate bond completed, Nessa stood on the same balcony where she had once stared at the mountains and doubted everything, but this time she was not afraid. She was pregnant with their first child, a daughter who would carry both the Theron strength and the Lunaris legacy, and the future that had once seemed so uncertain now felt full of possibility. Cade came up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his hand resting over the slight swell of her belly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. She leaned back against him, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. "I am thinking about how different everything is from that night at the ritual. How I stood in that circle believing I was nothing, and now I am here. Queen, mate, mother-to-be. It feels impossible sometimes, like I'm going to wake up and discover it was all a dream." He pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice warm with affection. "It is real. You are real. Everything you have become, everything you have built, it is all real and all earned. And I am so incredibly proud of who you are, Kalara Lunaris, my queen, my mate, my everything." She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him, pouring everything she felt into that single moment of connection. Gratitude for the chance he had given her, love for the man he had proven himself to be, hope for the future they were building together. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his, her voice barely a whisper. "I love you. I know I do not say it enough, but I do. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." His smile was brilliant, unguarded, the expression of a man who had found exactly what he had been searching for. "I love you too. From the moment my wolf recognized you standing at the back of that circle, I have loved you, and I will continue loving you for every day we have left in this world, and whatever comes after." They stood there together as the sun set over the mountains, 2 wolves who had found each other against impossible odds, who had fought for their right to be together, who had built something real and lasting from the ashes of rejection and fear. The future was not guaranteed, would never be without challenges, but they would face it together. Alpha King and Lunaris Queen, mates, partners, home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The ritual of the Crimson Moon that had started as what Nessa expected to be just another night of humiliation had become the beginning of everything. She had gone from invisible to invaluable, from broken to whole, from believing she would never be chosen to standing beside the most powerful wolf in the territories as his equal. And every day, when she felt the mate bond pulsing warm and steady in her chest, when she looked into Cade's golden eyes and saw her own. Worth reflected back at her. She remembered that sometimes the most impossible things were just waiting for the right moment to become real. Her wolf had been there all along, sealed, but never truly gone, waiting for the one person whose love could break through every barrier and call her home. And she had answered, had emerged strong and fierce, and ready to claim everything that had been denied her. That was the true magic, Nessa thought. Not the Lunaris abilities or the ancient bloodline or even the mate bond itself, but the simple, profound truth that she had always been enough. She just needed to believe it, needed someone to see her truly, and needed the courage to reach for what she deserved. Everything else had simply followed from that.